So if you're dealing with gastric ulcers or any type of inflammation in the digestive tract, in this video I'm going to help you understand what may be creating that problem and give you some steps you can take to maybe improve your situation. Let's jump in.
TC Hill is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
And remember, when it comes to ulcers and inflammation, I don't want you to view any of this as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I don't want you to view anything that you learn here as a reason not to seek medical help if you need medical help. I just want to give you some insights on the things that seem to be able to have the ability to create these problems. So if you look up what kind of symptoms might be coming along with an ulcer in the stomach, you're going to see things like burning or stomach pain or bloating or belching, nausea or vomiting, maybe some stomach discomfort or even heartburn. But when I'm looking at these symptoms, I kind of view like this one here of the burning stomach pain being caused by an ulcer in the stomach. But all of these other things here, I sort of view as things that can also be caused by the underlying cause that can create these ulcer situations. And when you look up what causes these ulcers in the stomach, you're going to see a lot of people talking about NSAIDs or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs that people are using for pain. Like when they talk about ulcers, they really don't have a lot of nice things to say about NSAIDs. That seems to be a common cause, but you'll also hear about other medications, even like aspirin. But what you really hear about is H. pylori, and that's a bacterial infection that is very common in the stomach, and it seems like almost most people have H. pylori in the body, but they might not have a lot of trouble from it. But if it kind of grows out of control a little bit, it can create a lot of problems. But you also hear people talk about maybe there's a lack of mucus in the stomach, because this mucus lining in the stomach is what protects that stomach lining from the stomach acid. So when we eat food, our stomachs make hydrochloric acid, or HCl, and that HCl is meant to help us acidify that food so that we can break it down. So this mucus lining here is what helps protect the stomach from that HCl so that the HCl does not digest the stomach lining. But before we get into how some of these things might be coming about, let's talk about some steps you can take if you're dealing with an ulcer or any type of inflammation in that gastrointestinal tract. And the biggest one that really seems to jump out and seems to be very popular is cabbage juice. And when I say cabbage juice, I don't like people to picture, oh, just do some juicing things, it's going to be so nice. Like, cabbage juice is not magic, it's not woo-woo, it's not like this situation of, hey, just juice things and it's going to fix and heal everything going wrong. Like, I'm not a big fan of juicing, and I even tell people, like, if your juice is delicious, it's probably not good for you, because it's just putting all these sugars into liquid form that can create a lot of problems in the body. But one thing I will say about cabbage juice, it is not delicious. So it does not meet that if your juice is delicious, not good for you criteria in any way whatsoever. But the reality is that there's actually a lot of ingredients in the cabbage juice that can be very beneficial when it comes to healing these ulcer type situations. There's this stuff called S-methylmethionine sulfonium, and a lot of people call this vitamin U. It's not an actual vitamin, but it just seems to be so beneficial when it comes to healing these ulcers that they call it vitamin U. And I'm going to put a link to a study below where they really looked into this cabbage juice for ulcers, and this was a while ago, but the results that they saw were almost unbelievable. And when you look at the results and you read this study, it's almost annoying that we don't talk about cabbage juice with ulcers a little bit more. And it also contains this NRF2, which is an anti-inflammatory and antioxidant, has a lot of vitamin C and L-glutamine. L-glutamine is an amino acid that is very popular for people supplementing with to heal the intestinal tract. And we know it's a pro-anabolic amino acid, which pushes the body into that state where it's really good at repairing and rebuilding. And the vitamin C can be a really big deal because most people are not getting the vitamin C that they need, and when they're supplementing with it, They're like a supplementing with ascorbic acid or some fraction of that whole vitamin C molecule that really needs to be available to the body for pretty much any repair and rebuilding process that it undergoes. Vitamin C is often part of that. So when you can get something in a whole food form like cabbage juice that's going to supply that vitamin C, it can really speed up almost any healing or repairing process. But what the study said was that most people were getting in about 32 ounces of fresh cabbage juice each day. And I think they were breaking it up into 5 increments. But I also hear from a lot of people that'll do it into 3 or 4 increments. Maybe you're just doing like 8 ounces 4 times a day. And it's okay to do it on an empty stomach, but it's also okay to do it with food. And when people did a little bit too much, they might experience some gastrointestinal discomfort. If somebody has a lot of bacteria in this stomach or in the small intestine, and some of these juices can kill off some of that, that can sometimes create some discomfort or even loose stool issues initially. But once you wipe out some of that bacteria, it's not going to create as much discomfort. And you guys may have heard me talk about celery juice before. When using that to help wipe out bacteria in the stomach, it seems to be very effective. Celery juice, they talk a lot about it, really needs to be used by itself. And you don't really want to put anything else in there, and you really want to use a large amount, like 10 to 16 ounces, to really fill the stomach and kill off that bacteria. But cabbage juice seems to be more effective at helping heal that lining in the intestinal tract. And it doesn't appear that you need to use so much cabbage juice at once, and it doesn't need to be on an empty stomach like you would with celery juice. In the study where they were using this cabbage juice, some of the participants actually mixed like 25% celery juice with their cabbage juice just to make it a little bit more palatable, and they still seemed to get the same results. So when it comes to cabbage juice, you really want to juice it fresh each day when you're using it. You could juice maybe 2 or even 4 doses at a time and keep it in the refrigerator with a lid on it, but it seems to be more effective if you can juice it fresh each time. So you want to get some fresh organic cabbage. It can be red or green, and just juice it and then drink that juice a few times throughout the day. And in this study, you'll see that most of the people saw a major improvement and even healed their ulcers in like 9 to 14 days. Some people took a little bit longer than that, but it was a pretty quick recovery when they were using the cabbage juice throughout the day. So a lot of people feel like this can be a very effective way to heal the lining of the stomach or intestinal tract even further down the line. When you're looking at improving like an ulcer situation, you don't want to just try to heal the lining. You really want to make sure that you're not going to continue to have ulcer after ulcer after ulcer. So when we look at some of these common causes like H. pylori, when we look at these symptoms that were showing up with the ulcer and we look at H. pylori down here, well, a lot of these symptoms are things that we see when a person is not acidifying their stomach correctly. When they can't acidify that food, it's hard to break it down. Then it has to break down by process of rotting and fermenting. Or if there's not enough stomach acid there, a lot of times that's how the H. pylori gets in the first place. It gets in because this stomach acid is not just there to help us digest our food, it's like the barrier to the whole digestive tract. So when bacteria comes in on the food that we're eating, they die in an acid bath when that stomach is acidified the way that it's supposed to acidify. The problem is that it's really common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. And then they'll see a lot of these symptoms like heartburn and burping and belching and nausea. So if seeing ulcers with H. pylori is really, really common, and we also know that H. pylori has the ability to alkalize the stomach, to create a better environment for them to thrive in. So if H. pylori is getting in there because there's not enough stomach acid to wipe them out when they come in, or if they set up camp and then they make that stomach more alkaline so that the stomach can't acidify correctly, it makes sense why we see all these symptoms when someone is also set up to have ulcers. So when we're looking at this H. pylori scenario with low stomach acid and possibly getting in because that front door was open and there just wasn't enough acid there to kill them before they came in and set up camp, there's also a lot of people who feel like this mucus barrier is there because of the stomach acid. That it's the stomach acid that triggers that mucus to be produced to protect the stomach lining from that stomach acid. So I can't find a study or anything that confirms this, but a lot of people feel like if there's not enough stomach acid, if a person isn't making enough stomach acid, then why would the body make that mucus to protect the lining from something that didn't exist? So if that's the case, and if this lack of stomach acid is restricting the stomach from making that mucus that protects the lining, then it would be a lot easier for this bacteria to irritate that lining, or for small amounts of stomach acid to irritate that lining since the mucus barrier was not really there. So there's people who kind of feel like some of these things come about just because of a lack of stomach acid. I'm not saying that that's what happens, but this opinion is pretty strong with a lot of folks. So if you're going to take all these steps of juicing cabbage juice every day, it's not super delicious. It's going to take some effort to do that. You don't want to do it for nothing. So if you're going to take that effort, then you also want to make sure that you close the door and that you improve this acid function so that the bad guys aren't coming right back in and setting up camp again. And maybe that stomach acid needs to be there for this mucus production to take place so the mucus can protect the lining of the stomach. Now, it might be appropriate to use like cabbage juice or something to help heal that lining first before you restore any acid function in the stomach. Otherwise, that acid will be causing some irritation to an open wound like an ulcer. But still, restoring that acid function might be appropriate after you heal that lining. So if you don't know if you're making enough stomach acid, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid, so you can check that out and get some indications of maybe how is your stomach doing as far as that acid production goes. Now, if you're dealing with inflammation maybe beyond the stomach, maybe in this duodenum or maybe even further down the intestinal tract, maybe like a Crohn's or colitis type inflammation situation, then we might want to think about other possible causes as well. And we need to understand bile flow. So bile is this soapy substance that's made by the liver, and then it's stored in the gallbladder where the gallbladder concentrates that bile. And then once this food that gets acidified in the stomach and goes down here into the duodenum, when the acidic product hits this, it triggers the gallbladder to squirt this alkaline bile down to help neutralize those acids. And that really helps us bust the food apart and get all the nutrients out of that food. So the problem is that a lot of people's bile becomes too thick and sticky to flow correctly. And if it's not flowing down here to neutralize the acids leaving the stomach, then those acids continue through the intestinal tract in their acidic state. Well, guess what those acids are made to do? Break down protein. And that's what your intestinal tract is made of. It's protein. So if this is moving these acids through, you could digest a hole right through the intestinal tract. And the body doesn't want that to happen, so it'll bring all the water that it can to cool this down and then rush it out the back door and we get crazy diarrhea stuff. So this is one of the possible causes of inflammation a little bit further down the line. So we also have a video on understanding duodenal ulcers, and we'll put a link to that in the description below too that kind of explains this a little bit further, how sometimes these ulcers, instead of happening in the stomach, can happen here in this duodenum. But we really need this bile to be flowing correctly to neutralize the acids leaving the stomach. And the reality is that sometimes this bile is not flowing because it doesn't get called on. It's the stomach acid that comes down here that triggers the gallbladder to squirt the bile down there. So if somebody's not making enough acid in the first place, sometimes this bile will sit in the gallbladder and continue to concentrate until it concentrates into sludge or even stones. And if that's not flowing correctly, then we can get a lot of these other problems. So sometimes the stomach acid is not triggering it to flow correctly because you see a lot of correlations between this hypochlorhydria, which is low stomach acid, and gallstones and bile sludge type issues. And I'll put some links to some studies below that'll help you dig into that a little bit further if you want to. And if you're not sure if your bile is flowing correctly, we'll put a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of poor bile flow so you can dig into that and figure that out as well. So you can see that there appears to be some natural steps that a person might be able to take, like cabbage juice, to help the body speed up that healing process when it comes to ulcers and inflammation. But if you're dealing with any of those issues, you don't just want to put a Band-Aid on it. You really want to figure out which of these underlying causes could be creating the trouble for you, and then take steps to correct the actual underlying cause so it doesn't keep coming back and again and again. And you can see, obviously, that this situation is going to vary from person to person. So I can't just tell you what to do in a video. You're really going to have to do some homework and figure out what's the situation with you and your unique body. And if you already know that you might be dealing with low stomach acid issues, then jump over right now and check out our video on why can't my body make HCl, so you can gain some insights into the things that can restrict that acid function and maybe some steps you can take to help improve the issue. Let us know how it goes.